Good afternoon. Today we are back on our favourite Friday afternoon webinars. I'm just going to give it a few minutes while we have people joining in. I can see the attendees numbers increasing quite significantly, so we'll let everybody have a chance to join in and be able to hear the whole webinar right from the beginning to the end. I am going to do my very best to try and make sure that we finish on time today, but I can't promise that I will. I've got lots of stuff that I want to cover today, but most importantly, I want to give you the opportunity to put your questions to me so that we can provide you with those all-important answers. So looks like our attendee numbers have stopped rising, but if anybody does join in, you know, of course you're all welcome to. So today's webinar we're talking about flexible furlough and how to manage staff grievances. Today is Friday the 10th of July and my name is Angela Clay from HR4 UK. If you're wondering who HR4 UK are, we are a leading provider of HR and employment law services. We also cover pensions and payroll, and we also provide health and safety support to our clients. We've got over 30 years of experience, and I would welcome you to come to our website and have a look at some of the fantastic 5-star reviews that we've got. This is not me saying how good we are. These are reviews coming from people who have used our services, who have found that we are helpful and you know, friendly and affordable HR support and you know, support that we provide you. So I would encourage you to go to our website www.hr4uk.com to go and read those reviews for yourself, and you know, hopefully you will enjoy reading them as much as I do. It's always nice and a pleasure for me when I go on and I see some new reviews. As a business owner, it always warms my heart when I can see that my team have helped out people like you. So you know, please do go and have a look. As I said, I'm Angela Clay. I'm an employment law solicitor, and I am an HR obviously provide support, but I'm the managing director of HR4 UK, and it's my role to be responsible for HR4 UK supporting businesses like yours to come out of this coronavirus crisis successfully. We provide HR support across the country, as far north as what we are, far south, east and west. So you know, we are everywhere where we can help you. I've said this before and I'm going to say it again, so I apologise if I start sounding like a stuck record, but my vision is for your business to come out of this crisis successfully by providing clear, practical and concise advice, and of course that all-important support, which is what makes it so much easier when you are going through this, to know that you're not there on your own, that there is somebody there to be able to help you with a handheld approach to take you through these very, very difficult and challenging times. So just a couple of housekeeping rules, just a couple of usual things. We have on your panel, on your dashboard, a control panel, there is a place for some questions. Please do ask questions. Your questions are important to us because not only does it, you know, answer, you know, questions that somebody else in the room might be asking or wanting to ask, or actually when it gets answered, you don't even realise that you were actually thinking of a question similar to that. So questions are really important. Do pop them into the questions, and hopefully we will get to those at the end of today's session. I am going to just run a little poll across everybody. I'm fascinated by the attendees who are attending these webinars, and I would really like to know if you would mind sharing this information with me as to where and how you came across our webinars, and all important is whether you find them helpful and useful, because these are really important for me, because I know then what is important for you. And as I've said all along, these webinars are for you, so that I can make them as useful for you. It's no good me providing all this information and it's not what you're looking for, so I'm going to rely on you to tell me what you want to hear from me. So I do look forward to those questions coming in to make sure that I can help you and your business Just a quick reminder that to make the most of this webinar, it is being recorded and it will be sent over to you during the course of next week, early parts of next week. We will collate all the questions that come in at the end of the webinar. Some of them I do get to answer at the end, but as always, we do collate them, and I do provide detailed answers in our Q&A that will go out with you. There are a couple of handouts on your control panel. These are handouts that have been given before. So again, it's the CRPD return to work flow chart, so you might be able to find that helpful. It's the HR for UK, a return to work COVID-19 risk assessment. And of course, it's an all-important guide on how to complete that risk assessment. Please do download those documents. They are really helpful. And of course, if there's any questions that come out of it, do give us a call. We're more than happy to answer the questions and help you, because that's what we're here for. So before I start going on to today's webinar, which I'm going to be covering things on how to manage staff grievances. These are the type of grievances that are going to be coming out as a result on how to handle staff who want to remain on furlough. There's work to be done. You need them to come back, but they would prefer to remain on furlough. How do we deal with those? Dealing with staff who are unhappy to return to work on the flexible furlough. So this is in situations where you have a new shift pattern and they're not quite keen on working the shifts that you have allocated to them. We've also got, parents who are struggling with childcare issues. We know that we are about to hit the summer holidays. Certainly, I know that summer holidays were always a headache for some parents because it's a very long time to be able to have kids in childcare. But of course, it seems like this has been going on forever, and that childcare holiday camps that you've always sent your children to may not be operational this summer. So again, you might be having additional issues with parents with childcare responsibilities, having concerns about what to do with their children, particularly if they've used up all their annual leave, what else can we do? So lots of people who are struggling with that. Of course, completing, you've gone through all the hard work, you've completed your COVID-19 risk assessment, and you want to get staff back in, but you've still got those members of staff that are being resistant in wanting to come back. Now, I know that over the course of the next few weeks, we're certainly going to be having the shielding that's going to be coming to an end. So there's lots of things where, we all know things are starting to get back to normal. I mean, my Tesco shop yesterday was a completely different experience to what I had a couple of weeks ago. A couple of weeks ago, it was very structured. It was very, there was lots of measures that were put in place, and trolley was nice and clean. Everything else was already. Yesterday when I went, all of that was gone. So that to me was a clear indication that things are changing, things are shifting to getting things back to normal. Likewise, my trip to work this morning on the M1, I haven't seen a traffic jam like I saw this morning in months. It was a real surprise when I joined the M1 and found this traffic jam. But again, it's an indication that things are starting to come back to normal. The government has announced more businesses that can open. We've got swimming baths that can open. We've got outdoor theatres that can open. Certainly hairdressers. I know many people are long waiting for their hair appointment, myself included. But again, this is an indication. But all of that requires staff to come back into work, and you are still going to have people who are going to be resistant. But I'll have a look at that in a moment. But before we get on to looking at grievances and managing staff and how to manage that, I want to just cover some of the measures that the Chancellor introduced during the week. So if anybody was waiting for the summer announcement, nobody would be more surprised than me to find out that there was more support coming along. Really surprise announcement. And if anybody was listening to me on the BBC Leicester radio on Wednesday afternoon, and I threw out the date of the 21st of March, and everybody went scurrying around to go and see what the 21st of March was, I didn't mean it. Obviously, I was referring to the January 2021, but for some reason, 21st of March came out of my mouth. It may well be a premonition of what's to come, and maybe that will be the date when you get your bonus payment. But if not, it's my birthday, so you can send me a birthday wish. But yes, I certainly got that wrong. But let's just have a look at the new job retention bonus scheme. So this is unprecedented additional support that has been provided to businesses. But is it the right type of support that is being provided? So let's just recap. So the job retention scheme was created. It started back in March. It has been open and been paying out the claims, and it is due to wind down in October. Obviously, the flexibility is being introduced from the 1st of well, it actually started on the 1st of July, but in terms of the financial support that you're getting, that is going to be dialed down from the 1st of August. But this new job retention bonus scheme is for the employer. And this is to make sure that people who are furloughed are successfully brought back into work. And this is to be beneficial to everybody, to make sure that individuals are brought back to work, skills don't fade, because certain skills, you know, that you need to keep on top of them. But again, it's looking at making sure that those skills don't fade. And of course, all important is maintaining that strong working relationship, which is very important. So with this in mind, the new job retention bonus reward is to incentivize employers to keep their employees on their payroll. It's all fine and well keeping employees in work if that work is actually there to be done. Because what the Chancellor was really clear about is that it must be, the employees must be brought back to do decent work. It must be meaningful work. They should not be brought back just for the sake of it. And that really rings true, because if you start thinking about how will that £1,000 benefit you, bearing in mind you're only going to get that payment next year, is it really an incentive to keep employees? Is it really going to help your business survive? Is it really going to be that lifeline that you need? It will be fantastic and great to get that bonus, but is it actually being directed at the right organisations? Because I know, speaking to organisations on a daily basis, is they need the financial help and support now. They may not be around in February or March of next year. So whilst I think it is really, you know, it was a surprise announcement, it was really welcoming, but I'm not really sure whether the support and help has been directed where it should be. So I'd be interested in what anybody else has got to say about that. So just a quick thing on how the job retention bonus scheme is going to work. So employers will receive a one-off payment for each furloughed employee who remains employed until the end of January 2021. The employee must earn over £520 on average for the months between November and January. Payments will be made in February 2021 after your RTI has been filed. But of course, further details will be announced by the end of July. The devil is always in the details. So I'm really waiting to see how that is actually going to apply, because it may seem quite unfair to an organisation who is perhaps really early on only furloughed staff for their minimum 3-week period to get that £1,000 bonus against a company who has been closed from the 23rd of March, when the lockdown was implemented, all the way through to the end of October. So again, there's a lot of issues that haven't quite been ironed out, but I'm sure we will wait with great anticipation to see how that is going to support businesses. The other thing that we have, of course, is the Kickstart scheme. This is something brand new. This is to create more jobs for young people. It is an emergency package to prevent mass unemployment. I think we all know that, you know, redundancies are ripe at the moment. We only had an announcement with Boots and John Lewis making, you know, more redundancies. So again, every week, you know, we're hearing of these big names where they are starting to go through these redundancy processes. So again, you know, whilst the government is trying really hard to implement these support packages, the reality is are they actually just delaying the inevitable? And I would certainly recommend anyone to take a real look at what the true situation is going to be for your business on the 1st of November and make an informed decision. Make those decisions early. There are difficult decisions. There are going to be decisions that are going to result in difficult conversations. But I think now is the time to really start looking at that if you haven't done so already. So again, I digressed a little bit, but the Kickstart plan is really to prevent an entire generation from being left behind. What the Kickstart scheme will be is the government will fund 100% of a minimum wage for 25 hours of a week, which will be open to all businesses across Britain. Employers will be able to top up the wages if they want to. So for 25 hours a week, the government will pay you the national minimum wage to be able to have a young worker between the ages of 16 and 24 who are on the universal credit, who are at risk of being in long-term unemployment. So again, the payments will be coming directly to employers. Applications to the scheme open from the beginning of August, and of course with more information to follow. As I've said before, you know, the devil is in the detail, and we'll have to wait and see, you know, what the detail actually entails. Of course, we will keep you updated as soon as we know what those details actually are. But companies will have to prove that the job they are making available to these individuals under the Kickstart scheme are new jobs that have been created. You cannot use the Kickstart scheme to replace anybody who you have perhaps made redundant earlier on in the pandemic crisis. So it has to be a new job. And of course, the government is making it very clear that you will have to prove that it is a new role. So again, the key thing is to be able to support those in that age category of 16 to 24. And again, you know, the emphasis is on providing them with a high quality job, which may include training, it may include on-the-job support, and it's really to give them an opportunity to get them onto the working ladder. So again, great if you've got a business that has survived the crisis. And as I said right at the very beginning, my vision is to make sure that you get through that. So hopefully with my help, guidance and support, we've got you through that, or we will get you through that. And perhaps it might be something that you would be thinking about taking up. But of course, as we would always advise, is if you are going to be doing that, do come to us, get some help and support, get some guidance on what you need to do for these young workers. So another scheme that was introduced is a new trainee and apprentice scheme. So, you know, traineeships we know are a proven scheme that is already in existence. It's to get young people ready for work, but it's for the first time ever where the government will be paying employers a bonus of £1,000 to take on a new trainee. Do remember that traineeships are different to apprenticeships. Both are very popular against, you know, amongst the young workforce. It is a really good way for young workers to get into the workplace, getting the help, support and guidance that they need from an employer. Traineeships can, these positions can last for anything between 6 weeks to 6 months. Quite often they are unpaid, but of course, as I've already mentioned, the government are going to be paying £1,000 bonus for you to take on a trainee. You know, this is there is another announcement that the Chancellor made, is that he will be giving a bonus package for employers taking on new apprenticeships. So again, you know, this is all in attempt to boost the economy, to get those young workers, you know, into work. So with the new apprenticeship scheme, I'll put my teeth in, for the next 6 months, they will pay employers to create new apprenticeships. They will pay businesses to hire young apprentices with a brand new payment of £2,000 per apprentice. They will introduce brand new bonuses for businesses who hire apprentices aged 25 and over. So again, that focus is not only on up until 25, but again, if you are going to hire someone over the age of 25 with a bonus payment of 1,500. So the focus has really been very much on the young, but I can't help but to think that there is a big gap in terms of those people who are perhaps in the older generation, the older workforce that have also been made redundant, who are also facing the same challenges as the younger generation. And I can't help that the government hasn't gone far enough to be able to help them as well. But who knows? Perhaps they will listen, perhaps they will think about the older generation who can, of course, bring so much to an organisation, with years of experience, and they will be able to perhaps, take a sidestep and have transferable skills. Perhaps the older workforce, could be taken through a training course that has an opportunity to skill their skills. So again, I think there is a gap there, but as I say, let's wait and see. Maybe our concerns will be heard. So that's enough about the changes that have been implemented in the week. As I say, at the moment, the detail is very light. We are expecting more guidance and information to come out. As soon as we know more about that, it will go up on our website. We will send you an email and keep you fully informed as to how these 3 schemes are going to progress and benefit your businesses over the course of the next 6 months or so. So let's have a look at today's webinar. So today's webinar, I really wanted to focus on carrying out a grievance procedure during COVID-19. And when I'm talking about the grievance procedure, we now know that lots of people are coming in with concerns as to why they perhaps don't want to be coming back to work. For various reasons, right reasons or wrong reasons, it'll be down to you to determine. So I'm going to spend the next sort of 15-20 minutes or so just recapping on the grievance procedure, just to remind you on how that works and how it actually interacts with COVID-19, because of course the rules as they were have to be adjusted to take into account a whole raft of different factors that you didn't have to deal with 12 months ago. So employment law and ACAS code of practice rules on disciplinaries and grievances still apply. You can't cut corners, you can't make changes, you still have to make sure that you follow the correct legal process when dealing with grievances during COVID-19. And this includes, when we've got social distancing, it includes when we got lockdown measures in place. We know at the moment that whilst the restrictions are being lifted across the country, we know that local to us, Leicester has gone back down into lockdown. So again, you have to be mindful that what is going on in your business may well be affected by what's going on in your regions around you. It may well be that it's not going to affect your business area, but it may well affect where your employees actually reside. So again, here in Hinckley, we're okay, but quite a few members of staff actually live in the Leicestershire area where the Leicester lockdown has been applied. So again, it does have an impact on how the business can run. So again, it's bearing in mind those sort of things. The circumstances about the grievance should be taken into consideration, because employers need to be able to demonstrate that they have behaved and conducted the grievance hearing procedure in a fair and reasonable way. And the best way to make sure that you're being fair and reasonable is to constantly liaise and consult with your employee. Get them on side, get them on board, communicate, explain to them what you're going to be doing, get that feedback. Now, sometimes you may feel this is the merry-go-round that we're going to be going on. This is going to be the merry dance of going backwards and forwards. The employee's just not going to buckle. But there does come a point where you can actually say, no, we are going to do this, and we're going to do it this way. But prior to getting there, you will have been able to have demonstrated that you have listened, you have talked, you have consulted, and only when you have reached an impasse have you then sort of implemented the real sort of rule book, so to say. So again, making sure fair and reasonable, those are two words that get used so many times, but so many times it's wrong. People get it wrong. People get, just by one little thing where you may have said something, behaved in a particular way, which makes everything then unfair or unreasonable. So do be careful and do mind the way that you manage these things. So if someone's on furlough, so that is when someone is on temporary leave, grievance procedures can still carry on. Now, normally you would get a written grievance. Normally, grievances that you get is a complaint about the way somebody has handled something, the way somebody has perhaps felt in the workplace. There is some sort of feeling of wrongdoing. Normally, it comes in the form of a letter, lands in your desk, and you have to deal with it. But of course, with COVID-19, a lot of people have been furloughed, so they are at home. There may be members of staff who have been able to stay in work and are carrying on working. So there is this difference between those who are at home and those who are in work. And how do they communicate their feelings of being aggrieved? Some of them, when you are having that phone call, you're giving them a phone call to say, hello, and I'm going to pick a name, and if I have a Sally out there, I do apologize. I'm not referring to you specifically, but if you ring up and you say, well, hello Sally, this is Angela from HR for UK. Well, obviously they'll know it's from you, but this is from Angela from work, and we're looking at bringing you back, and we've got this great plan. We've done our COVID-19 risk assessment. We shared it with you last week. We really now actually want you to come into a shift pattern starting on Monday, and look forward to having you back. And you get this deadpan response at the end of it saying, I can't come back to work on Monday. Oh, okay, and you start dealing with it that way. So there's no written grievance, there's no written complaint, there's no written issue. It's all over the phone. So again, let's have a look at how we're going to deal with it, and I'll have a look at that during the course of today's webinar. Even if you are having to deal with resistance over the telephone, I don't want to come back, whether it's by email correspondence, always make sure that if you are having those conversations over the phone, you document it. Make sure you make notes and you document it so that if ever you have to go back to it, you've got those notes, rather than thinking, oh, I think it was on a Friday afternoon when I spoke to you. Make sure that you are as well prepared as you possibly can be in the event that anything is challenged. And the best way to do that is to put it in writing. Obviously, if you've had email correspondence, naturally that will create an audit trail itself. But because we're dealing with remote workers in in many of the situations, make sure that you document it, get it in writing. So again, the grievance procedures must, as I said, always be fair and reasonable. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, you always need to make sure that your fairness and your reasonableness is still within the confines of the government guidance. So employers will need to consider their own policy. So have a look at what your own policy says on how you're going to be handling these sorts of grievances. You might want to think about putting in a temporary measure during COVID-19. This is how we're going to deal with it, and it might be something that you want to have a look at and review regularly. For those of you who are clients of ours, I've just had a brilliant thought there. Don't worry, I will be updating your employment handbooks to make sure that we have some COVID-19 measures in place in your disciplinary grievance and appeal procedures. So clients of ours, you can rest easy. I will make sure that's updated. Of course, as always, we'll send out an email to make sure that you are aware of that. Talking about our existing clients, if you haven't been onto your handbook already and you haven't been able to come up for air for your to read all your emails, we have updated your handbook to make sure that there is a COVID-19 health and safety policy in there. So again, the beauty of using our services, it automatically gets dropped in. So again, you may want to have a look at your current procedures and want to insert and make sure that you have perhaps a temporary process on how you will deal with grievances and disciplinaries during this COVID-19, because it is going to be rumbling on for a good few months still. So it would be good practice to perhaps get that in place. So employers should have a look at your overall policy and consider about putting some changes in, you know, how it's going to be addressed, because we're all facing additional pressures, and there may be challenges in being able to have those face-to-face or digital online meetings. But of course, any of these procedures must still be taken forward without any unreasonable delay. We can talk for days about what is reasonable and what is unreasonable, because what is reasonable for one person is unreasonable for another. So again, make sure that you don't delay and you move things forward, not only because it will get things to an amicable resolution, but also it will stop having that extra stress and anxiety that individuals who are going through a grievance procedure or resisting to go back to work, and you as a manager having to deal with it, because of course it is stressful, but having COVID-19 add to it makes it even more complex than what it already is. So employers should try and find a safe and fair, reasonable way to go about their procedures. If it's not possible, think about whether it would be fair and reasonable to perhaps suspend the grievance. Now, you're probably thinking to me, I need my employees back into work. Why on earth will I want to suspend it? But there may be good reason why you're actually thinking, you know what, I'm not going to address this issue at this point in time, but I am going to address it at a later point, okay? And this is particularly important when employees have been unreasonable in their refusal to return back to work, because you want to make sure that you address it. Don't keep it and store it up for another day when perhaps there is a disciplinary that may arise, and then you throw in their reluctance to return to work. Make sure that if anybody has been reluctant to return to work, make a note of it, perhaps. Use it as an opportunity when they do come back into work to say, look, you know, you put us under a very difficult situation. I'm not going to take issue of it, but make sure that you do address it at the appropriate time, and don't store it up to use at another time, because it will not wash. Make sure that you address things in the appropriate time and manner. So of course, if an employee is if you have a recognised trade union, make sure that if you are going to be varying or changing any of your grievance procedures, that you do talk to your trade union representatives to make sure that that is covered, because it might not be appropriate to implement certain changes. So again, you know, make sure that you consult with the right people at the right time. When you have a grievance, make sure, or you have that resistance. When I talk about grievances today, I'm talking about the resistance of employees wanting to come back to work. Perhaps they don't want to be on a particular shift pattern that you are proposing them to come back on. And again, I will address those in detail later. But make sure that you consider the circumstances of each individual case on a case-by-case basis. How it applies to employee A does not necessarily mean that is how it's going to apply to employee B. So make sure that individual cases are dealt with sensitively and on a case-by-case basis, because how you proceed in one particular grievance process may be different to how you address it in another. So again, if something is urgent and needs to be dealt with, it may not be appropriate to delay it. It may be appropriate to deal with it as quickly and as swiftly as possible. So again, make sure that you understand, you know, what the specific issues are and deal with it sensitively and appropriately. So if it's many businesses may have been having a grievance that was started and then suddenly we went into lockdown. With lockdown, everything just, you know, I want to say died a death. It just sort of stopped. But now that businesses are coming back, you might need to revive a grievance that wasn't resolved back in March when we went into lockdown. So again, you know, you might have to think about, you know, has that issue been resolved, or actually has the delay made it even worse? So make sure if you have had to delay a grievance, make sure that you address it as quickly as possible. And as I say, at the moment, you're probably having most of the grievances coming in when you are actually contacting the employee and they are then showing their resistance in returning to work. That should be dealt with under your grievance procedure, because it is an employee who is resisting. And I will come back to that, because you're probably thinking, oh, Angela, previously you've told me I need to talk to them and I can force these things through. Of course you can still do that, but again, when someone is resisting coming back to work, it is a means of saying, I don't want to do that. I'm aggrieved by what you are asking me to do. So again, it's just looking at it from a different angle. You know, just bearing in mind, employment tribunals are, you know, we are already spiking with tribunal claims. And of course, you know, dealing with the matter must be dealt with in a timely manner, because of course there are time limits within certain matters can go to a tribunal. So again, you know, talking through these options, talking through things, addressing things, making sure that you address any concerns is done in a timely manner, because if it can be resolved, you may save yourself a lot of hassle in having to deal with an employment tribunal claim coming into to your business. So again, you know, talking through how you're going to proceed with things. If you're having that telephone conversation, it may well be appropriate that you say to, and again, I'm going to use the name Sally. If I have a Sally in the room, I'm not picking on you. It's just a name that's coming to my head, and I'm going to be using that name today. So it may well be where you've rung up Sally, and she's you know, indicated her resistance on wanting to return to work. Perhaps there's resistance on, you know, taking unpaid leave, resistance on being required to take annual leave, you know, during furlough periods, all sorts of things that might be coming about. Make sure that the employee is aware of how you're going to be addressing this. So again, you might be saying to the individual on the other side of the phone, saying, look, Sally, I'm going to need to look at this, but this is a procedure and this is how I'm going to address it. So the employee knows what you are going to be doing next. So there is consistency on how you are going to be treating all the different individual employees. Because if you have a process in place, you can't be, well, you minimize the risk of being accused of treating individual employees differently, because of course we have to be very mindful of the big D word of discrimination. You've got to be very mindful that you don't discriminate against one employee against another. So again, be mindful if the employee has a representative or a companion, you know, how are you going to be able to manage that? And do you think about other people who are going to be involved? Are you going to have to accommodate you know, their companion in the way that the matter is going to be addressed? Because of course, any formal grievance has a prescribed format that it needs to be dealt with. And don't forget that when you are dealing with these things, that it may well come back that you have to readdress things to make sure that you get that grievance procedure process correct. And it will help making informed decisions on whether it is the right thing to be proceeding with a formal disciplinary, either face-to-face or online. Once you have got all the facts together on how you're going to be dealing with that, it is very useful to have that with you. So it will help you as a manager make an informed decision based on the individual circumstances of the individuals that you're dealing with on how best to proceed. And that will go a long, long way in showing that you're being fair and reasonable, whether it is going to be, and I've used this before, whether it's going to be an employee resistant to return to work and come off furlough, whether it's been fair and reasonable where an employee is being resistant on going on a particular shift pattern, where there are childcare responsibilities, or when an employee is raising you know, health and safety reasons why they shouldn't be returning to work. So again, understanding all of that will put you in a much, much stronger position to be able to defend yourself if you find yourself in the unfortunate position that you're in an employment tribunal because of the way you have handled those matters. So when you're talking through the options, it's important to consider if there is you know, good reason to go ahead or not to go ahead. Do I force the issue? Don't I force the issue? think about that. Is there anybody in the meeting that is going to be having issues in terms of attending the meeting remotely? Is it going to be possible or feasible for the employee to be accompanied? Do remember that the legislation provides that an employee can only be accompanied in grievance and, of course, disciplinary proceedings by a work colleague or a trade union representative. Well, how do you get those people to be able to sit in and participate in a fair and reasonable meeting if you haven't taken all of those personal circumstances into consideration? Going through, I've said this before, going through a grievance procedure is quite stressful in normal times. And with COVID-19, there might be additional stresses that individuals are facing at this particular time. So really, you do need to be mindful and careful on individuals' health and well-being on when deciding on when and how to proceed. So of course, if the workplace is open, so you've been back at work, you've got your workforce back in, obviously all of those involved can go to the workplace, but you must consider whether you are being socially responsible in having that face-to-face meeting, and can the face-to-face meeting be heard arranged safely. I heard a story the other day where an organisation was slowly getting members of staff back in, but of course meeting rooms are too small, and they were having Skype meetings with each other where they were sitting about 4 or 5 desks apart from each other, simply because they couldn't go into a meeting room. So there are ways of being able to do it even if you are in the workplace. So again, make sure that any meetings that you do arrange do still comply with the government guidance when having these face-to-face meetings, and of course make sure that the employee's companion can attend the meeting as well, because that is their right to be accompanied if they so wish. So again, if anyone has any reasonable objection as to why face-to-face meetings shouldn't go ahead, listen to those concerns. It may be relevant, and again, it will go a long way to show that you are being fair and reasonable when dealing with the grievance. Make sure that if you're dealing with the grievance remotely, that you put in measures in place when you're doing that. And those kinds of measures are, we're using video platforms. Make sure that even if you are using a video platform, that the process is still fair and reasonable. It's important to make sure that everybody who's going to be in that meeting on that process has access to the technology to be able to have the video meetings. I myself have been attending Zoom meetings since the beginning of March. I tried to attend a Zoom meeting on Tuesday, but for some reason I could not get in. I simply could not access that Zoom meeting, which I found really frustrating, bearing in mind I've been doing it quite regularly. But again, it's making sure that the technology is there, the equipment is there, the internet connection and access is there. And there's a brilliant question that's come in about that, on how to address that with an employee who has been asked to work remotely. They live in a village where the internet connection is really, really poor. So again, it's addressing those sort of things. Make sure that anybody who has a disability or other accessibility issues that may affect their ability to use a digital platform, that you do think about putting reasonable adjustments in place. So make sure that you have those measures in place before you start having the meeting, because as I say, that will go a long way to make sure that you have a fair and reasonable meeting. Again, when you're dealing with sharing evidence, or, so for example, you might be wanting to share the COVID-19 risk assessment, make sure that anybody who is on the digital platform, who's looking at that, and you are sharing and screen sharing, that they can actually see it. because sometimes when you do go into screen shares, it's so tiny that you can't actually see what's on there, which will mean it's not really a meaningful meeting that you're having. So again, make sure if you are going to be having these meetings on a digital platform or on a video meeting, that it is clear and everybody can see it. So make sure that whatever you do is done fairly and reasonably. And double check, cross check, ask yourself the question, has this been fair? Has this been reasonable? Because that's a good way of sense checking of whether you've got it right or whether you've got it wrong. So while we're talking about video recordings and recording of digital meetings, of course, you would need to make sure that if you are going to be recording meetings, that you have everybody's consent and agreement that you are going to be doing it. If one person is resistant and not wanting to have it recorded, you should not be recording it. You must make sure that if there is an agreement to record it digitally, it must be done within the laws of data protection. So GDPR, a big reminder on making sure that you get that consent. Of course, don't forget the employee's right to be accompanied. It's an absolute right. An employee has the right to be accompanied, and that still applies during COVID-19 and the pandemic crisis. It still applies whether it is a face-to-face meeting, and it still applies whether it's on a digital video recording. But just a reminder that the employee's companion can only be a work colleague or a trade union representative. You may want to consider, depending on the circumstances, of allowing somebody other than a work colleague or trade union representative to accompany the individual employees at these meetings. It would be seen as a reasonable adjustment, but again, you are not obliged to allow it. Do bear in mind that if you do allow a family member or somebody else to participate, you will have to allow it for every employee. So again, be mindful that you don't create a rod for your own back. It is always best practice, certainly in my view and my experience, to stick to the rule book because then you won't have it bite you on the bum when you least expect it. So again, making sure that the employee is aware of their right to be accompanied, but also how far that companion can go in terms of who can attend. Assuming that the employee does have a companion, of course, the companion can sum up the employee's case. They can ask questions of you as an employer, but of course, if you as an employer asks the employee a question, it is for the employee to answer. Of course, if the employee wants to converse with their companion, ask their companion a question, you should allow that to help. So again, making it as fair and reasonable as possible without, falling foul of the law. The employer should make sure that you talk to the individual and their companion, make sure that they understand the particular circumstances. While we're here, what are we talking about? What are the concerns? What are the likely outcomes? Again, it's about that, communication, being, open about what you are there for, the procedure and the outcome, the likely outcomes that are going to be there. Do make sure that when you are arranging formal meetings is that you consider the availability of the employee's companion, because of course, if you are working on a shift pattern basis, their companion may well be on a shift that the employee isn't working on. So again, if they have a trade union representative, they may not be able to participate at the time that you are proposing to have that meeting. So again, make sure that everybody is available at the suitable time. Of course, if an employee can't attend the original proposed time, they can rearrange it and they can suggest another time. I would suggest that that is done within 5 working days. It is no use or help to anybody for letting it drag on any longer than that. So certainly rearrange within 5 days, because of course delaying it more than 5 days in the eyes of a tribunal judge, they might find that to be unfair or unreasonable. But again, it might be dependent on the specific circumstances. But again, you know, as I've said, as an employer, you must be able to demonstrate that you have acted fairly and reasonably at all times. So again, you know, the right to be accompanied, you should explain the decisions once you've come to a conclusion at the end, decide what the outcome's going to be. So again, using our examples, the outcome might well be is that I'm sorry, but I am going to be taking you off furlough, and your options are continue to take unpaid leave, or you can take any accrued but not yet taken holiday, assuming there is still some left. Or considering what other options and alternatives there are. So again, we've still got layoff clauses that are available, etc., etc. So again, it's being clear to the employee what the potential outcomes are going to be. Make sure that everybody is clear and what's being decided and what are the next steps. And again, making sure that whatever the decision is, you move to that as quickly as possible and make sure that you do it in a safe, fair and reasonable way. Reminder, really, really important that you must, as an employer, you must, and I'm going to say it again, must follow the ACAS Code of Practice on disciplinary and grievance procedures, even if they are dealt with over the phone, even if they are dealt with, you know, on digital platforms. You must follow the Code of Practice, because of course, if you don't, an employment tribunal could make the decision to actually increase the level of compensation by up to 25% for failure to follow the ACAS Code of Practice. So it is really important that you do follow that. Of course, there is the right of appeal. An employee's right to appeal any decisions is still available. It doesn't go away because we're under lockdown or COVID-19 still exists. You know, we still need to make sure that there is the employee's right of appeal and that the employer follows a fair process, fair and reasonable process when addressing the appeal. So again, I've touched on time limits, and I'm not going to go over to that again, because like in a nanosecond, it's already 10 to 4 and I haven't even looked at those all important questions. So let's just have a look at very quickly. I think I've covered quite broadly speaking on how to be dealing with you know, grievances whilst we're in lockdown, while we're in coming out of the pandemic crisis, while we are still dealing with flexible furlough, the furlough scheme, and all the various options in between. So again, just let's drill down a little bit more into some of these issues that many of you, I think, are still facing, because I can certainly see it with the questions that are coming in into the advice team. So, you know, how do you handle staff who want to remain on furlough? The most important thing to remember here is that it is still the employer's decision. If you as an employer has decided that you are no longer going to take advantage of the furlough scheme for whatever reason, it may well be a moral reason, it may be that you're thinking, actually, you know, we've put enough pressure on the you know, government purse, we are not going to be doing that. It may be a decision that you make that actually 99% of my workforce is actually back in work, and I don't really want to open up and encourage people to be using the furlough scheme. It is still your decision whether or not you are going to be using the furlough scheme. So if employees are saying to you, you can still use the furlough scheme, you are well within your rights to be saying, I have decided, or we have decided, we've taken a business decision that we are not going to be using the furlough scheme. But do listen to the reasons why the employee is wanting to remain on furlough. It may well be because they are I want to say shielding. Shielding is coming to an end. Certainly in England, you know, it comes to an end on the 1st of August. Wales, I'm not quite sure about Scotland, but I'll come back to you guys. But I think, you know, shielding is coming to an end. It is being lifted. I think it's the 15th of August or 16th of August when that is lifted. So again, the justification for someone wanting to stay on furlough because of shielding is going to be diluted because, of course, the government is lifting those restrictions on shielding. The employer may be explaining to the employee that the contributions that have to be paid can no longer be claimed back from the 1st of August. So, of course, there is those, payments that do need to be made. It may not be financially viable for an organisation to be able to pay those additional costs. So again, it's having a look at the reasons why, as an employer, you don't want to be using the furlough scheme. But of course, it is down to you. It is purely your decision whether to leave an employee on furlough or not. But you must be mindful that HMRC are going to be doing retrospective inspections, and as long as you can reasonably and justify why you have left someone on furlough, why you are claiming those that government funding when there is work to be done, and your workplace is in a safe, is COVID-19 safe, in all those measures, I think you would need to really have some good reasons why you are keeping employees on furlough. There has been a shift in recent weeks on whether employers should be continuing to use the furlough scheme or not, and it is specific to each individual organisation. Absolutely, in some cases the furlough scheme is the only option, but in other situations there are other alternatives, and the government is really keen to get people back into work so that we can start getting things up and going, running again. So again, there's still options in terms of not using the furlough scheme. We do still have unpaid leave, and of course there is still accrued but not yet taken holiday if that has not been used during the furlough period. You might be introducing a new shift pattern where individuals might be saying, well, I don't want to work mornings only, I don't want to work afternoons only, I prefer it this way or I prefer it that way. Again, it is your choice. You are the employer. You need to dictate to the employee what those shift patterns are going to look like. I always say, be mindful that the tail does not wag the dog. Be mindful that you don't let employees dictate the way you are going to be running your business. Of course, have the conversation with them to try and find a reasonable way where you can work together, but don't feel bullied by employees in having a shift pattern that isn't going to work for your business just because it works for them. But again, it's all about having those open and honest conversations, discussing it and coming to an agreed way forward, because that will help prevent having issues at a later time. It may well be that you've got individuals where you're saying, well, I've only got 12 hours a week, and the employee is saying, I really need to get back to my 40 hours a week. If there isn't the work to be done, that needs to be explained to them. So again, whilst I'm talking about employees not wanting to go on a specific shift pattern, the opposite is also true, where they may be wanting more hours than what there is work to provide for them. So again, it's about discussing it with them, coming to that conclusion and coming to an agreed way forward. I mentioned earlier that we've got a number of parents who are going to be facing or continue to face childcare responsibilities. Again, try and understand what those are. Lots of organisations are going back, and of course, childcare responsibilities, well, primarily, it does sit with the woman, but there are other ways around it. Now that shielding is starting to be eased, start looking at grandparents, start looking at the wider network where support can be provided to individuals, suggested, but don't force it on. Listen what employees have got to say, try and find an agreed way forward without coming out with the rule book. But of course, once you've explored all options and there's no other choice, sometimes you are left with nothing else to do. But even if you are left with nothing else to do, make sure that you do it fairly, reasonably, and within the realms of the law. So don't take chances. You know, we do know that we are in difficult and challenging times. You know, I'm just going to very quickly talk about a case study that I was dealing with, where it's quite a big organisation. They have quite a big HR department, and they have an employee who has 3 children under the age of 5. Both her and her husband are working from home, and of course homeschooling, childcare, you know, has really been quite challenging. But the organisation has made a decision that actually they are not going to be participating in the furlough scheme, and she needs to come back to work. She raised a grievance. She did it both formally. You know, we did go through the formal process, and the outcome was that we're not going to put you on the furlough scheme. We are going to require you to take unpaid leave. And she agreed to that, because at the end of it, she does still want a job to go back to when the schools go back, hopefully in September, where she will be able to return back to work and will be able to be a valued member of the team. So again, it's about finding that resolution. It's about having those discussions. It may not be the answer that the employee wanted, because of course in this you know, case study that I mentioned, she did appeal it because she felt it was unfair that the scheme was there. But of course, they've gone through a fair and proper process. It's been documented. It is all there, so they can carry on in the safe knowledge that they have gone through a fair procedure. It may not be what the employee wanted. Yes, it was very difficult for the manager to manage, but they've got the comfort in knowing that this is the way that is going to be forward. As I say, don't take chances. Don't try and cut corners. Don't take those risks. There is help available. You know, don't think you can't do this. Always ask the question. If you're thinking of something, I think I'm going to do this, phone, give us a call, sense check it, make sure you are doing the right thing. Rather take the time out to double check, sense check it, rather than getting it wrong. It will not be worth getting it wrong, I can assure you. And always just be careful about discrimination, how you deal with things, and particularly in the current climate, make sure that you don't fall foul of the discrimination laws, because they also still apply. So again, you know, just before I get onto the questions, I'm just going to have a look. I haven't even been looking at the questions, and I have only got 3 questions here today. So I'm going to have a look at those. Those are questions that were sent in to me prior to the webinar. As I said earlier on, those questions that have come in, we will make sure that we collate those all at the end, and we'll make sure that you get those answers. But before I end up, you know, we have you know, a number of resources to be able to help you. We have our paid for webinar next week on conducting a redundancy process, making sure you get redundancies right. So it's next Wednesday, the 11th of July. If you want to join me with that, you know, do get in contact. We'll send out the link and make sure that you can have that individual sort of small group webinar meeting. I said webinar meeting, webinar on how to get redundancies right, making sure that you dot all those I's, cross all those T's, and make sure that you get it correct. So next Wednesday, 15th of July, our paid for redundancy webinar. We do, of course, have our crisis package, which is a more of a handheld package where we delve deep. We are going through the process with you. We provide you with all the information that you need, step by step. We take you through, you know, the drafting process, the delivery process, and we take you through everything. We don't leave you on your own. We really are there to provide you with that handheld support and guidance as you go through it. You know, we understand these challenging times. You may well be a very experienced manager who's dealt with HR issues many times, but you might feel a little bit out of your comfort zone and just want that additional support. Particularly in these times when there is this crisis, when we are dealing with people who are perhaps a lot more sensitive than what they would normally be. It feels quite personal, because we know that actually we're putting people out into the world of unemployment. We know that unemployment is going to skyrocket. We know that jobs are going to be sacred, and it's quite difficult and quite personal when you have to actually put someone out there. But don't feel alone. Our crisis package is tailor-made for you, your business, and your specific needs, and we will discuss it with you. We will discuss a way forward, and we'll agree a way forward before we actually take it any further. So, we have been working with a number of businesses, and we've successfully gone through processes with a number of companies, and the feedback that we've had has been really, really positive. It's been really, really good, and from our point of view, it's been really satisfying knowing that we have been able to help you. So don't do it on your own. Don't struggle. Don't feel you can't ask a question. Don't feel that you can't do it. Give us a call. We will be able to help you. So just a quick reminder on how you can get in contact with us. We are at www.hr4uk. You can contact us through the contact us form. You can give us a call on 01455 444 222. Or you can drop us an email, which is info@hr4uk.com. So again, do get in contact. We are here to help and support you, and don't struggle on your own. Don't struggle on your own. So let's just have a look at those couple of questions that have come in prior to our webinar. Of course, if you have questions, email them in. If you want them to appear in next week's webinar, do send them in and I will answer them. They don't have to be about today's webinar. It can be about anything. So don't feel that, oh, I can't ask that question. So this particular question has come in and it says, hi, Angela. We have brought back most staff from furlough, but one employee not yet needed as their requirement in the workplace is not open to the public, but we are hoping to open shortly. My line manager has contacted the employee to let them know that the furlough will be ending and she would be required to return to work. She has said that this will not be possible as she has a 3-year-old daughter who is normally looked after by her mother. They are unwell, so are unable to assist at this point. Clearly, we don't have the details of that, but of course, clearly, she's relying on her wider network to be able to help and support her with childcare issues. So this is a childcare issue. So again, in this situation, I would advise you to speak to the employee, discuss alternatives. Are there any other options? We've talked about it before. Are they able to do the work at home? Clearly, from the email that's come in, it would appear not. It would appear that this is something that cannot be done from home. And again, furlough is still an option. She could still stay on furlough until her mother is able to help and assist her, or perhaps I've forgotten where I was going with that. So again, it's unpaid leave is an option. You can leave them on furlough, and of course, if there is still accrued but not yet taken holiday, you can still put them on that. Whatever you do, you should make sure that you have regular updates with the employee. Make sure that you have regular communication with them to understand when they can actually return back to work. Because although we don't understand what the reasons why the mum can't look after the child, her little girl at the moment, that certainly isn't going to be long term. So again, it may be a short-term issue, in which case it may be a week or two. Obviously, if it's a long-term issue, you need to have a look at the long-term options there. So I've got a similar question. An employee, we've got a client, employees are working from home. It's a call center type of work, which they have been able to pick up calls from home and remotely. They have successfully been able to access their systems. However, one employee is unable to pick up calls and access the systems due to internet. This individual has been furloughed, but now we want him to come back to work. We have got our workplace COVID-19 risk assessment in place, and we do have staff on a rotation basis coming in. Can we ask this employee to return to work in the workplace on a permanent basis? Very good question. Of course you can. As long as you've carried out that COVID-19 risk assessment, you have shared it with the employee, Work can be done, it can be done at home. So again, I think it's time to take this individual off of furlough and actually they can come back to full-time work. You may want to consider putting them onto the flexible furlough to make sure that you know, you have limited numbers of people in the workplace, but there is no reason why that individual cannot come back to work on a full-time basis. So the last question, oh no, I don't, I've got another question here that's come in. So again, this question for this afternoon's webinar, please, Angela. I run a nursery and the business is starting to pick up slowly. I would like to bring one member of my team back from furlough who works 24 hours per week for 16 hours to support with cooking, level 3 duties and other admin work as she is multi-skilled. Is it fair for me to bring her back and give her preference over my cook who is also on furlough? Very good question. I would be asking, why would you be putting anybody, giving anyone preferential treatment over another? So potentially you've got to be mindful of this particular case that you don't fall foul of the discriminatory rules and regulations. So again, have a look at why do you want to give this particular employee the hours and not your cook. So again, be mindful of discrimination, but we will come back and obviously provide you with a much greater answer. My last and final question I have for today is I have a question for today's webinar. An employee has 2 staff, both furloughed, but now needs to bring them back into work. Both are saying they can't come back to their normal hours. One is saying she can only come back at the end of July as is committed to helping her husband, and the other can't come back until September when children go to school. Can she continue to furlough the one but move the other to childcare unpaid leave? Absolutely. So again, this is a prime example of an employee being resistant on wanting to come back to work. They have been furloughed, and whilst on furlough you can't do work for your employer and you can carry on doing work for elsewhere. I'm not quite clear what commitment this particular employee has to helping her husband. Perhaps her husband has a you know, his own business and she's helping out there. But again, the responsibility, your primary responsibility is to your employer. So absolutely, I would put that employee onto unpaid leave until she can return at the end of July. And of course, in terms of the individual who is you know, still with childcare issues, you may want to think about leaving them on furlough, or again, you may want to take them onto unpaid leave. We have one more question that we have got here. So Jane, thank you for bringing that in. So for your question is, for anyone on the flexible furlough, can you just do an agreement that states flexibility around weekly hours, or do you need to be specific? I think at the moment, that's a great question, Jane, thank you for asking. It's about flexibility, because what you might need today, you might get done very quickly. You can be quite, I want to say vague in the furlough agreement itself. Where you need to be specific is actually when you start calculating that furlough payment, that furlough claim even, is making sure that you have clear records of what is worked so that they can receive their worked hours pay, and what is furloughed so they can receive their furloughed hours pay. So as far as the agreement is concerned, no, you don't need to be specific. You can agree that on a week-by-week basis. You may even want to agree it on a day-by-day basis, depending on your business needs. So, you know, I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much, everybody. As true to form, I have long gone past the 4 o'clock mark. I thank you very much for your time in joining me today. I see that I still managed to keep you, most of you, onto the webinar. I didn't have anybody dashing out the door at 4 o'clock. Do have a fantastic weekend. Thank you for all your help. I say thank you for all your help. Yes, I thank my team for all their help in helping me get this webinar together. But I thank you for giving up your time to listen to me, to you learn from what I have got to say, to make you better prepared on how you are going to be managing your business, managing your staff as we come out of this pandemic crisis. Just a quick reminder, if you've got any questions, do pop it to me, info@hrforuk.com or www.hrforuk.com, or give us a call, 01455 444 222. And on that note, have a happy Friday, everyone, and have a fantastic weekend. And I'll see you all back here next week. Bye for now.